all of this, so I can't really.
Oh, there it is. Hello, everyone. I'm Casey Dynneson. This is our ninth episode of the Dynneson discussions, and that is my dog. What? Go away. Uh, oh my God! Already off to a banging start. No. Today is a very interesting discussion. We're talking about fantasy and kind of the. Oh my God! Already off to a banging start. No. God damn it! It's just going all wrong today. No. Today we're just talking about fantasy and sort of the roots it has in mythology and kind of its evolution to the point we have now. We're also going to be talking about some archetypes today. And with me today is a new guest, Miss Tatiana. You want to introduce yourself, Het?
Sure thing. Hi everyone, my name is Tatiana, and I'm actually just trying to start up my YouTube channel, and I have been inspired by people like Jordan Peterson to kind of start talking about a lot of like these issues, especially archetypes. Especially since I am also an art student, so I think that has a lot to do with me gravitating towards this kind of material. And yeah, so I'm just starting up. I'm kind of a newbie, so yeah.
Fantastic. Well, so I mean that's kind of something that we met in the group,
Mm-hmm.
so that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I think we should start with just kind of exploring some ideas that kind of originate with Jordan Peterson, and I was wondering what's one concept that he talks about, uh, maybe fairly consistency that you like.
So what is it that I'm attracted to his work in terms of, or what do I gravitate towards a little bit more, you mean?
Just some concepts, yeah, just some concepts.
Oh, okay. Well, here's the thing. I feel that there's a lot of concepts he reiterates from Carl Jung, which I wasn't necessarily familiar with. Well, I mean, I was, but not so much to the point as I am now after being exposed to Jordan Peterson. And I feel that I guess one concept that I absolutely love is just, rescue your father from the underworld kind of thing, just because it's playing on this idea from Jung, which goes along the lines of people have to know their own myths, and you never know, your myth could be a tragedy, your myth could be I don't know, like it can echo. I mean, there's some mythology, there's some myths, there's some stories that really speak to us, right? And that's why, and then we kind of feel an affinity with it. So I guess that's partially why I am attracted to that concept. But again, I think that's a concept that originates more with Jung, and I think Peterson is just like bringing it now. It's kind of bringing back a lot of Jungian concepts, which is actually really cool because I feel that most of the time we fall into or we. I think I almost feel we focus a lot on Freud and almost not enough on Jung, and I mean it's no wonder why. He's a bit of a scary guy to look into. There's a lot of concepts that are really tough to grasp. So I guess that would be one concept I really like that Peterson brings up. Um, I like the concept of responsibility. I think that's another one that I think is sorely needed nowadays. Especially since I mean, we are the generation that has been coddled and we've been told, you don't have to worry about this. I mean, mom and dad will look after you, or
Sort of a regressed kind of generation.
exactly. And so I think that that's also like a cool concept that I think we need to hear. I think he says mostly guys need to hear, which I absolutely agree with. Women should too, because I think, especially with how the feminist movement has kind of uh, gone amok, it's kind of like they want to have their cake and eat it, but they don't realize that if they want to step into the fields that men do, or they want to take up the mantle that men do, that it requires a lot of responsibility and requires, I'm sorry, if you hear a mariachi in the background, I apologize. But yeah, I think that's something that we all need to hear, because I think there's this stress on rights and that somehow the world owes you something. It's like, no, it's actually earned, and you have to sacrifice a huge part of yourself. And that's another concept. I think that also ties in very well to responsibility. I love that he's reintroducing Christianity again, or trying to get people to come back to it in a way. Well, not necessarily come back to it, but understand how it's at the root of Western civilization now. And I mean,
not so much proselytation, but more like just a re-examination of key values is what you're kind of
exactly. And then finally, let me think. Well, speak your truth. I think that's another one that is also. I think, I don't know if we're the. I don't know if I can say that we are like the generation, or we're the age where, I mean, well, we've done away with the concept of truth, right? Especially if we look at how the postmodernists have reduced it to a matter of subjectivity or relativity, I should say. So I think that's also something really important. Another key concept that I think he brings up that I gravitate towards. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot more, but I don't want to sit here all day.
Yeah, well, for my bit, I think what I find fascinating about him is, yeah, he is kind of going back to that Jungian perspective of archetypes. Mm-hmm. I'm a writer, so we had to study that in school. Mm-hmm. Speaking of archetypes, what is your favorite? I should ask, just in general. Do you have one at all? As far as
a favorite archetype?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's tough to pick an archetype. Like, because here's the thing, like how I was introduced to the archetypes, now, just for a little bit of some backstory, I used to fiddle around with New Age thought a lot. So I was really into the tarot, into the Viking runes, into angel cards, oracle cards, whatever. And I feel like that my concept, I almost feel that I came closer to Jung because of the New Age. So I guess now to answer your question, I'm gonna go off by like the archetypes the tarot kind of bases itself off of. I like the concept of the high priestess or the holy fool. I think those are my two.
Could you explain what those are, just in case we don't?
Sure thing. So, if I'm not mistaken, the high priestess is now. You kind of have to look at the major arcana like as a process. So it starts off as the holy fool, and I can't quite remember where it is, like which is the last card of the major arcana, but so for the high priestess, I think she's like I think that's the third card, and that comes after the magician. Now, the magician is the masculine energy for, I think it would have to be namely wisdom, or I'm not sure if I'm mixing that up with the emperor. But the high priestess is mainly, she kind of mediates between the night or something like that, and I think she's the feminine counterpart of the magician, who kind of points out that not everything is as it seems. I almost feel she kind of goes in line with the moon as well, the moon card. It's kind of tough. There's a lot to the high priestess that I like. I think that she. I guess she falls in line with with the wise old woman kind of thing. I would have to say that's the closest I could get to that. The Holy Fool, I think the Holy Fool is pretty straightforward. I guess I guess he's more of like the potential before a journey, and before you start, you don't know necessarily where you're going, but you're driven by something divine. That's what is going to help you, or that's what motivates you to go into the unknown or to make yourself into something, I guess. So, yeah, I guess that's the best I can do right now.
Could you think of any literary or specifically, I guess, in the fantasy realm? I don't know how connected you are with that, but could you think of anyone that really fits into those archetypes that you really like as a character, just in any fiction?
Let's see. Let me try to find one for the High Priestess. I think that the one. Okay, I'm really bad with my Lord of the Rings character lore, so I apologize. I've only watched the movies, and I can't really sit through 3 hours of unfortunately. But I would have to say, what's the name of that one? It's not Arwen. It's the blonde elven chick or whatever that Brother talks to.
Galadriel.
Exactly. So that name's gonna go over my head, but anyways, there
it's
you
Kate
go.
Blanchett. It's Kate Blanchett if you want to.
Yeah, exactly. Kate Blanchett. There you go. So I would say she falls in line with that archetype. Now, in terms of the Holy Fool, I feel like the Holy Fool is the hero. That's just where he starts. So I mean, if we want to use the if you want to use an example, what's a good example? I'm honestly really tempted to say that it might even be like the hobbits that go on that go into Mordor. I would say they would fall into it, but the thing is they're guided by Gandalf, which I think he obviously falls in line with the wise old man, or the magician archetype, which is actually the next card after the Holy Fool. So I guess what's interesting is that I think that the magician has a lot to do with propelling the fool to go forward, and then comes the high priestess afterwards. So yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I really like as far as archetypes that I like, I do like the sort of guiding mentor, so kind of like the Gandalf figure, just because he's such an integral part of pretty much every story you've ever heard. And he's something that constantly pops up, because I'm assuming you're kind of familiar with the hero's journey model. Yeah, well, yeah. So for those that are watching, about Joseph Campbell discovered this. I don't know when, or he didn't really discover it. He sort of put it together, but that there's a almost a cyclical pattern and reoccurring themes in universal mythologies.
Right.
And they all follow this cycle of certain events happening. Now, they don't always happen the same way, but you could always find figures or themes within them. And one of the things that consistently happens is this sort of teacher-like figure will appear. It's that old adage, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Right.
And that's been consistent throughout almost every fantasy setting, every movie, really. I mean, regardless of genre, it's there. For example, you have Obi-Wan, obviously, in Star Wars, and so on and so forth. And I have always found that to be and it's to relate that to maybe real life. Everybody needs to have that sort of model, which hopefully your parents fulfill in some way. But if not, you should strive to find one, or at the very least, always be open to be taught.
Exactly. I guess one mentor figure that I find actually extremely fascinating is Virgil from Dante's Inferno, or the Divine Comedy. And what's really interesting about him, I feel that I mean, if I'm going to be applying it to the major arcana in the tarot, I almost feel like, because the thing is, Virgil, he is the, he's based off of a Roman writer, right? So he has all of this knowledge from from previous civilizations. He's well versed in Greek mythology, uh, Roman history. Obviously, he wrote the Aeneid, I think. I might be butchering the word a bit there. So it's a really fascinating figure that that Dante uses to be his mentor as he goes through Inferno, Purgatory, and then to Paradise. What's interesting about Paradise is that Virgil then leaves Dante, and then Dante is reunited with with his childhood lover Beatrice, who then leads him through the seven heavens. I think it's the seven heavens. I'm not really quite sure. I've only gotten through like all of Inferno, and I'm trying to get through Purgatory. It is a heavy read, but
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about that is that if we're going to be considering the Holy Fool, the Magician, and then the High Priestess, I almost feel that those archetypes are fulfilled in the form of Dante, Virgil, and Beatrice. Beatrice being the last link to reach paradise, almost. So I find that also particularly interesting. And what's also like, it's kind of tough to. I mean, the reason I had a bit of a hard time to pinpoint the High Priestess is I almost feel she's not exactly wise. She's just a bit more on the supernatural end of things almost. And if you think about it, also in the tarot deck, I mean, if you like, the cards have different meanings when they're reversed and then when they're upright. So it is a lot about like divine feminine. Like if she's upright, then it's supposedly a good omen, that a woman will enter your life who's going to propel you forward positively, and then if you get that the High Priestess negatively, then it could mean a deceitful woman, pretty much. That's
Well,
also.
what I've noticed that whenever people talk about sort of an entrance into heaven, or even in really the giving of power, if you look at any myth, it's always done through a woman. Like take
Mary, you have Mary, yeah.
Mary. Oh yeah, that's another thing. This is why I get so pissed off when people say, "Oh, Catholicism is such a misogynist religion."
No, far from it. Far from it.
Oh yeah. I mean, have you? Who gets venerated more? The mother, the Holy Mother of Jesus? Yeah, more than Jesus, more than the Son of God.
Exactly. Here's something. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So I actually lived in Mexico for about 12 years. I moved back up when I was 17. And if there was one thing, so Mexico's a fairly Catholic country. And honestly, like, Mother is God in the eyes of people down here. All right. She's central to Catholic worship, even more so than the Father. I almost feel that the Father, I mean, I think, mind you, like if you compare like a lot of Western countries like Canada, U.S., and Europe now to a certain degree, getting to that point where they're having like this thing of this, like, well, the Father doesn't mean anything. I mean, as much as Mexico is a really macho country, the Father is not respected as much as the Mother. He's almost I think everyone is quick to assume down here that the Father is easily corruptible and the Mother is pure, she's benevolent, she's compassionate. So I find it really hard to believe, or I think I kind of share your sentiment when you hear people, especially feminists, say that there's something really patriarchal about Mary. It's just like, there's a huge importance in being the vessel, and she is the doorway to salvation, pretty much, or she is what brought about the salvation in the end. I mean, if you even look at, I don't know, Revelations 2, The Great Red Dragon and the Woman Clothed in the Sun. The Woman Clothed in the Sun is, well, she's with child, and she is who will bring forth salvation. So even though, I mean, especially if you want to talk about the Judeo-Christian tradition, there's one thing that I've noticed is that there's a lot of women that are really resentful about the fact that it had to be Eve who caused the fall. And
she's also the one that, but her sex is also the one that saves it. That's kind of
exactly. So I fail to understand, why isn't it that we can't find something redemptive about Mary? I think that's also that's a huge. I almost feel that especially feminists. I mean, if you don't mind, I'm going to put it kind of archetypally. It's as if they'd rather identify with the archetype of Lilith, which is actually another really interesting story. Supposedly, Lilith comes before Eve in the Jewish Torah, and she is what we now address. She's now what we attribute to the succubus demon and all like that. I almost feel that feminists, or a lot of women that fall in line with the third wave feminism, they find this wicked kind of archetype somehow empowering. I don't know how many movies I've seen which are feminist related, and it's always about being a witch, or making a deal with Satan, pretty much. I find that I sit there, I'm just like, guys, for if you're really trying to give off the fact that you are the benevolent savior and femininity is the shtick here, you're kind of just you're kind of falling in love with the more destructive side of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I find that just kind of vaguely stupid, to be honest. but I don't get that. Well, it's not just that. It's that if we're just gonna go off on a tangent with just the feminist mindset, I don't like when they demonize masculinity, like really healthy shit. They shit on the dad, even though the dad is important.
And you know what? And a lot of, and here, if you want to go back to like the fantasy concept, I mean, the father and the mother are equally important. I mean, I think the reason why we still go to the movies, or we are still so intrigued by fantasy as a whole, is because these archetypes are, depict a mode of being, right? Or what's the best way to become become a better version of yourself, become your highest ideal. And you know what, who's like, if you look at the hero, who does he have in the beginning, or she? It's mother and father. I mean, get rid of one of those. I mean, mind you, I do see that they are trying to play along with that, try to say, oh, all families are equal and all like that. It's like, well, no. I mean, I think there's a lot of literature to support that broken families, or single parent homes, are not necessarily functional. I mean, I can't, I'm just because I recently saw Wonder Woman, I'm just going to pull it in real quickly.
Yeah.
So what I find interesting is, what's funny is that like you think it's only the mother figure that's there for Wonder Woman, but it's actually not the case. If you think about it, Wonder Woman was created also by Zeus, and Zeus is the patriarch that protects the Themyscira, that protects the Amazon. So it's not a matriarchy. They still serve a patriarchal figure. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying that, I mean, what's interesting, as much as they try to avoid it, they can't help but have to bring it back down to earth in a way and say, well, you need both masculine and feminine. I mean,
yes, and that's why I got really upset. Just on on the subject of Wonder Woman, is that she really got co-opted, probably around the time of the 70s, when Betty Friedan put her on the cover of Miss Magazine. Prior to that, she was a very egalitarian person, like very much so. Like she was very much like, she always had this good relationship with Batman and Superman. You really respected him. I mean, yeah, with Superman and Wonder Woman especially, because talk about a paragon of good masculine virtues is Superman.
Right.
He is everything that a good people in general should strive to be a Superman. Whereas men in general really can relate to Batman because he brought back from trauma of his parents' deaths.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that weird. It's kind of an interesting thing.
It is interesting, yeah. I mean, you know what I find interesting? I mean, if to just go off on that, I find it really interesting how we seem to be more attracted to underdogs in a way, or that we're interested in. I mean, I'm not to say that Batman necessarily is an underdog, but he has so many flaws. I mean, first of all, he's not like Superman. He's not invulnerable. I mean, I think, but he makes it up with with skill, with intelligence, with material with material goods, with resources, and I think that's I almost feel that Batman is a little bit more of a I don't want to say realistic rendition of the archetypal hero, or like if we're comparing him to Superman, but I almost feel that he represents he shows off attributes that we find admirable, right? Like the resources, like the fact that he's intelligent, like the fact that he's skilled, and it's not because he's blessed by something out of this world, right?
Yeah, what I've often attributed to him when I talk about the Batman Superman thing is Batman is God is man made into God, whereas Superman is God made into man.
That's interesting. I like that idea. It's kind of like there's this concept that Peterson brought up, and this is just going to be really brief. I think the word is kenosis, which is God becoming man. So I think that's a really interesting way to look at it.
Well, if you I'm a connoisseur I've been a connoisseur of comics for about 10 years, for a good chunk of my life. So, but the way you hear criminals talk about Batman, it kind of connotes a godlike presence he has in his little domain of Gotham.
Exactly.
I mean, people are scared shitless of this guy. And and the iconography of a bat helps there. That's another thing. I've always they've given a lot of reasons why he's taken on the iconography of the bat, but it's mostly for fear. It's a good guy using fear against somebody.
Exactly. And you know what? I was reading. I'm starting to read Answer to Job by Carl Jung, and I was reading the preface. And it's really interesting because basically the reason why Jung got criticized for Answer to Job is because he kind of sided with Job in saying, well, no, God actually did screw you over, and that's actually kind of not cool. I think that's actually kind of almost like wicked and cruel on God's part. And he attributed he said that we had to come to a new understanding of God. I think, I could be wrong with this, that is both good and evil, because he believed that, I mean, God isn't God if he's not all encompassing. To say that he's all encompassing, you can't leave out that he can also be bad.
Oh yeah, I mean, just take a look at the Exodus story. God's a murderous son of a bitch.
Right, and here's the thing. So Jung attributed like a new image to the image of God to this Gnostic God. I don't know that much about him. All I know is that he's got a head of a rooster and he's got 2 snakes for legs, which is pretty bizarre. His name is Abraxas, I think, and I'm not really quite sure what he represents, but he said that he encompasses both good and evil, and how this, going back to Batman, I think that the whole iconography of the bat, I think that, because I mean, he and even how the criminals talk about him as something almost like godlike, it's still something to be fearful of. And I think that Batman has this kind of this balance between, well, he has his foot in order and his foot in his other foot in chaos, right? He is the I almost feel that he's almost attributed to this archetypal god that is almost like Abraxas in a way. Yeah, so I would I mean, I'm not that much of a comic connoisseur, but from what I've seen, and I mean, like, thing is, I was only into Batman when Arkham City came out, and then I went into Arkham Asylum, then I got into the Batman animated series. So that's kind of where my knowledge kind of is.
If you kind of remember, because like you just said, you were kind of a fan of a signature catchphrase of Batman during the animated series, and this was constant thing was, he identifies himself as an agent of vengeance before anything else. But that's when he was younger. You actually see when in his younger days, prior to I'm going to give you a little bit of comic books history, so enjoy this. So what happened was, 1930s Batman comes out. He's basically a carbon copy of another character called the Shadow, except with a Dracula motif. But the thing with this is most people don't know is that Batman used to carry guns, like pistols and stuff. So he was more like a Punisher than anything else. And what changed though was that the comics code forbade anybody from getting killed. So what happens? Batman loses his guns and now refuses to kill. Now in the story wise, they've addressed this by saying Batman actually killed somebody, regretted it, and have since never done it again. So it's kind of this weird thing that he evolves as a character as he gets older. The young Batman is pretty much just focused on vengeance, whereas the older one is more focused on
justice.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's kind of a cool thing. I always like that.
It is, and I mean, going back to this kind of this God archetype, I think one thing that I can kind of understand why people kind of fell out of line with this concept of God being good and evil is I think, I mean, I know I'm attributing this a little bit more to Batman. I know he's not necessarily a god, but I think we treat a lot of comic book characters like gods, like heroes and all like that. They're like the new gods. So, but I almost feel that just that interpretation, well, just that transition of early Batman, 1930s Batman, to like that was using, there was hell bent on vengeance, and then all of a sudden to someone who's upholding justice. I almost feel that's kind of like Old Testament God versus New Testament God. Almost, it's interesting. I think that I mean, a lot of people can say what they will about Old Testament God, but I almost feel that it's kind of like, well, he kind of had his reasons to do what he did in the first place, but throughout his the transition from the old to the new, he then becomes more about upholding truth, upholding love is another thing. So I think that's really interesting that a lot of that's how a lot of superheroes kind of start off. They kind of start off kind of campy, a little bit
really brutal in a lot of ways, actually.
Brutal, and then they all of a sudden start to transition into something lovable, something that's not perfect, but that upholds certain values. And I think that's really interesting that they kind of fall in line with kind of the transition that Old Testament God and New Testament God kind of goes through,
Well, yeah. Just speaking on kind of like kind of briefly on the earthly and the divine, sort of the concept of God. I've always sort of pictured the relationship that God, because I mean, constantly we see in the Bible, he calls his people his children. So I've always, and he's called the Father, regardless of
God the Father.
Yeah. So I mean, you can kind of see that, and anyone that's had any interaction with their father for any given amount of time, notice that their dad isn't always the nicest person to them, but it's not out of evil. It's sort of out of necessity.
Out of necessity, yeah. It's a cruelty that's needed. I mean, I think this is also an Old Testament saying. It goes, "Spare the crop, spoil the child."
Spare the rod, spoil the child. It's and I was never spanked as a kid, but I was definitely I was spanked once. It hurt like a son of a bitch because it was with a cord.
Oh man,
Yeah.
no. I think I kind of went through the Mexican kid form of punishment where your mom just throws her chancla at you or her sandal at you. So that's kind of
My father never really, because my father was the disciplinarian. I'm scared only of my mother in the sense that she is a very tiny woman that projects herself to be very big.
Oh my gosh, no. You know what? My mom, I almost feel my mom is a lot more masculine than she gives herself credit for. My dad, I think he was really easygoing about a lot of things. So whenever it's kind of like, hey, so the girls did something bad, you know what? I'm just gonna let my wife deal with it because she knows how to, and I have a hard time being disagreeable. So
Yeah.
um,
Well,
so,
I
so
think
yeah.
I think it might because are you the oldest or the youngest of your?
All right, so I am the third out of five girls.
Mhm.
So I would no, actually, never mind. No, I'm the fourth. Sorry, I'm the fourth. So I'm the
Oh, so
second.
you're near the tail end.
I'm near the tail end, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. But no. But that's why I'm the oldest out of my three siblings. Out of the three of us, and the
Mhm.
other two were girls.
Okay.
So I think my father, knowing that I was one, the only boy, and two, I was the oldest, probably was harder on me than he was on my other siblings, just
Yeah.
because he knew that it was gonna be on me one day with them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. I think for I mean, being five girls, you're kind of going, well, I mean, crap, you can tell. I think I joke around with my mom a lot, and I was just like, well, man, mom, were you and dad really trying to get a boy? And we just said, okay, five is enough, we're not going to try anymore. But
the funny thing is, my dad was all raised with. He's the youngest of five kids, and the other four were girls.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, so he's the youngest, and right away his firstborn is his firstborn out of wedlock in a Catholic family
Mm-hmm.
is a son,
Oh,
and
uh-huh.
it was one of those weird things that he always had.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of weird. Funny story. I'll tell this real quick, then we'll get back to discussion. No one
Yeah.
in my family knew I was going to be born,
Oh.
because my parents, my my dad wasn't living with my family with this family anymore. He was out on his own with his buddies, and
Mm-hmm.
my mother is super tiny, like really really tiny. I can't stress how tiny is. We're not talking midget size, but we're talking tiny enough that
I
she,
believe you.
yeah. And so when they found out they were pregnant, they thought, oh, we'll tell someone eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so this was about maybe tail end of winter into summer.
Mm-hmm.
My mom always wore these really baggy um, sweaters, so no one saw her stomach, and they just kept putting off telling people until September 11th. My mom's water breaks, and they rush to the hospital, and they have me. And so my dad calls up his parents, and my mom calls up her parents and say, "Congratulations, you're godparent, you're grandparents now," and
Oh,
everyone just rushes there. So for
oh,
9 months, no one told them that they were going to be godparents.
wow.
Yeah, I thought it was just amazing that they kept it for that long. But
I
yeah,
know.
but going back to the topic at hand, and kind of venturing it more into you know myths. Have you looked into like sibling rivalries in mythologies at all?
Which now, sorry?
Sibling rivalries.
Oh, yeah. I've always found those very uncomfortable to look at, I have to say, so I've avoided.
Because you can see yourself in them.
I can see myself in them, and that's the scary part. I think one sibling rivalry myth. I think well, I think it's one that we're all familiar with. The Cain and Abel story. I think I find that the most poignant, simply because it really does hit the nail in regards to the human need for vengeance, and this kind of revenge against God kind of thing. If it's kind of like this, if I can't be like my sibling who is clearly way ahead in the game, who is clearly, they have money, they have status, they have material goods, they're married, and then you're just sitting there and you're going like, and here I am, and I'm floundering. Why is it like I feel as if God himself is out to get me? And then what I find really interesting about that is like, I'm not going to pat you on the back. It's like, no, here's the thing. You've actually let that serpent come in and you've co-created with it. So, I mean, if you did good things, that's also something else. If you did good things, then you wouldn't be upset. Then you wouldn't be, then you wouldn't be, then you wouldn't be upset. You wouldn't be in the position that you are, and well, this is what's happening to you. I'm just telling you how as it is, and depending on how you take that, and obviously, that Cain gets angry and he goes and he kills Abel, and here's the thing. I think what scares me about Cain and Abel, I think it's mostly in regards to Cain and Abel. I think that I'm not really familiar with a lot of sibling rivalry stories, except for the only one that I can think of, which is a comic book one, or at least when I'm thinking about Teen Titans, I'm thinking about Blackfire and Starfire for some reason. But what scares me about that is because I find myself relating to Cain, and then that kind of scares me because it's just like, wow, I understand where this guy's coming from. I understand what it's like when your parents tend to favor your older sibling or your younger sibling, and here you are, you think you're busting your ass off just to get their attention,
and they're just dumping on you just consistently.
Exactly. And then and what scares me the most is then being consumed by this hatred, by this resentment, and then going out and then destroying something that's actually good for the world, or destroying something that is the ideal. And that's something that I mean, that's also a really interesting concept, the being driven to kill or to destroy something perfect. There's a really good book that I think I would almost say it's kind of like a Japanese version of Crime and Punishment, which is also another Cain and Abel story if you think about it in a way. It's called The Temple of the Golden Pavilion by Yukio Mishima. It's a really interesting book. I highly recommend it. The story goes that so there's this guy. His name is Mizoguchi, and he has a speech impairment, and he is basically, he's bitter, he's resentful about the world, but he wants to become a Zen Buddhist. So he's then sent to Kyoto, and then when he faces the Golden Pavilion, which is where he's going to study, he can't stand its beauty. He feels almost threatened by it. He's enraptured by it, and yet he's like, I will never be something beautiful. I will never be, I would just be happy if this damn building, the concept of this building would just cease to exist. And in the end, he goes out and he destroys the temple. What's interesting, it's based on a true story. This is like, I think, shortly after Nagasaki and Hiroshima, I think, maybe a little bit before, but yeah, basically the story was that this guy just torched this temple, and then and the authorities, when they caught him, they said, okay, well, why the hell did you do that? And he's like, I couldn't stand its beauty. I felt threatened by it. I would rather exist in a world where there is nothing but disgusting, horrible, hedonistic people, because if there is that ideal sitting there, it's just going to drive me mad, and will make me think that I have to do better. And really, I don't want to do better. I don't think I am capable of it, so I have to destroy this ideal. And that's a very revenge against God kind of concept. I mean, it's revenge against beauty.
Well, I mean,
in a
what
way.
what I've noticed is, kind of tying once again to like,
Mm-hmm.
I guess modern or pop culture. Lex Luthor's entire existence, in relation to Superman,
Mm-hmm.
is not so much envy against or hatred against God. It's more of hating the Paragon because
They are the Paragon.
yeah, because he's a Paragon. If he is the ultimate thing by virtue of being himself, then
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing left for humanity to strive for.
Yeah.
That is his rationale. That is such a bleak outlook
It
on
is a
humanity.
outlook. It is a bleak outlook, and I mean, especially in regards. I mean, to go back to Cain and Abel, what I find scary about that is that it's towards someone that is your own flesh, that is your flesh and blood, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a concept that, I mean, I could, pull in, like, from my own life. For instance, I have a sister. She's just turned 30. She's out in Malaysia. She's got her life together, and there are times that I just sit there and I just go, you know what? Here I am. I'm struggling here, and I mean, I understand that she's also 7 years older than me, but I mean, that's another rationale I'm not going to get into. But you're just sitting there and you're going, like, I like, you just seem so perfect in every shape and form, and I know, like,
You're happy for them, but you want them to do bad.
it's awful. It's awful. And then and I'm just thinking, what would be scary is just how far, or like, what would make someone reach a point where they feel that they have to destroy someone, like their sibling, like something that they actually cherish. I mean, what point do you have to get to do such a thing? And I'm not saying none of us are capable of. And I mean, I know I'm sounding like I'm condoning, yeah, yeah.
It's
So that's, yeah.
Well, I
And
mean, just in, I kind of have felt the same way. Just again because my siblings are I will always cop to this. My siblings are infinitely more academically inclined than I am. I may be smarter than them
mhm,
in some ways, but they are more academically inclined, meaning they
mhm.
can shut up in class and actually retain some of the knowledge. Um, yeah, but no, but they're better at that than I am, and sometimes that's kind of been a poking thing at me, but I've only ever felt the need to quote unquote kill them once,
No.
and it was one when I was very much younger, and
Oh, yeah.
I didn't. You always notice that it's always when they're very young.
When they're, well, yeah, because I mean, well, think about it. Like, as a kid, you're just an atomic bomb of all these emotions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one little thing, you snap. I mean, you're either really happy, and sometimes you're really upset. I mean, that also has to be like an indicator about, like, how your parents are raising you, and then, well, that's a whole nother spiel right there. Um, but yeah, it is normally like when you're younger, but sometimes, you know, I almost feel like it, that kid in you that's really explosive with their temper tantrums, they never go away.
Oh
They
no,
never
they come back with a vengeance during fucking puberty.
do they, or I'm reading right now the Gulag Archipelago right now, and I'm just sitting there. Like, some of these things that the interrogators did, for instance, you're going, like, at what point does, like what triggers this well, this brutality? Like, is it like, I almost feel it's kind of like, well, it's kind of just giving yourself leeway, like giving the shadow free reign to come out in any shape or form that it chooses to come out, almost. And I think that's, I mean, you could argue, I mean, obviously the same goes for the Nazis and all like that, but it's I'm just like thinking. I mean, obviously there has to be some kind of resentment that pushes it, that forces it to come out. My only question is, what else is there that brings it out, other than a negative emotion? Can something maybe positive bring it about, or something like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the shadow ultimately isn't just a bad. It's not just solely a bad thing.
Exactly. No, it's not. Yeah.
It's just the darker emotions and how we choose to express those darker emotions, like anger and aggression. That will determine, that will determine whether it's a good action or not. So I mean,
Exactly.
if you,
Yeah.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
if you want to express anger, go go take up boxing. You might get really good at it. It might improve your situation.
It might, and there's also this concept that I think it's great that also Peterson brings it up too. And another really important concept from Jung that he's bringing up is the integration of the shadow, right?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, here's the thing. I think that's one of the concepts that I have a bit of a harder time. Not because I don't believe in it, but I guess my only question is the implementation. I think that just varies from person to person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's also something really interesting. For, just to go back to hero archetypes and especially in fantasy. Okay, I'm not a Harry Potter fan. I've never been a Harry Potter fan, but I did find the concept of Harry having a part of the snake within him.
Yeah.
That's an integration of the shadow concept, right? Because you have to be a bit of a monster to face the unknown, or you have to, or to face another monster. Let's put it like that. So, I think we're at a time where where we put such a stress on political correctness, and you can't do that. You have to, you have to be agreeable. Oh, sorry. Oh, oops. Oh, hello.
Sorry, my fucking my internet cut out. Second.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well, anyways, yeah, like you were saying.
All right. Yeah. So, what I was saying was that we're getting to this point where we're being told that we can only be all good, otherwise we're no good, right? And that we're supposed to be harmless, and I think that's also, but that's also why a lot of us are, a lot of our generation is not as strong as they could be, because they've been told that everything that has to do with strength, well, this is particularly for guys. This whole suppression of masculinity is also like why you're not getting a lot of guys that are, that are going out there, that are, that are manifesting their masculinity in a healthy way anymore, because simply because of also like I would almost say the feminist re-education that was kind of around during the 90s had a lot to do with how guys are right now too, especially if you're talking about like maybe a little bit their teens, kind of coming into their 20s. So I think that's here's what's funny. I almost like they tell girls that they can feel like they can be bossy, they can do all these things, but the minute a guy does it, that's another affair. But uh, the thing is, it's almost as if like, well, obviously you need regulation, right? And they're giving too much open, free range for women, to the point where I almost feel they become all shadow and no light, but they just, or they're not aware of it. It's kind of, it's that creeping, it's those, these creeping little tendrils that come out like with like behind this visage of compassion,
Yeah.
Mhm.
What I've noticed in that regard is he, women generally don't have a good outlet for that,
Mhm.
so it
No.
just kind of just boils underneath. Whereas men, even though that's kind of slowly being taken away, which is why I think you're starting to see men go to other avenues to kind of find
Mhm.
outlets. Some of them might not be as healthy,
Mhm.
but women really don't have that much anymore, or at least they. I'm trying to avoid stereotyping, but
No, no,
women
no, no. But here's the thing: like some stereotypes, kind of,
are true. Yeah.
some of them are true. I mean, some things are general truths. I mean, obviously there's someone who doesn't fit the binary, but I mean, it's still a binary nonetheless, you
Yeah,
know?
well, what I've noticed that women tend to rely on less physical attributes. Like they could,
Hmm.
like, you know what I mean? And not say rely, but they when they need to, they don't when they want to exercise their darker side, they very much go intellectual.
I
If you
would say so, yeah. In a way, I would say they're more, well, obviously they're more emotional about it. Like, I almost feel that if they want to manifest anything negative, it's like, I don't know, the cold shoulder or
the withholding from warmth from a guy.
anything from warmth. That's I think that's their form. That's I mean, and I can totally like agree with that and say, yeah, that is how we try to manifest it more. I mean, if you ask like, oh well, what about like, I don't know, punching, punching something or whatever, just like, well, no, obviously that's not like, we're more emotionally inclined. We're kind of a bit more likely to be like, we need to rant about it,
Yeah.
or we need to withhold from it, or we need to be passive aggressive to get the point across that we're really annoyed.
Yeah. Well,
Almost,
I
yeah.
think that characteristic is one of the huge divides between men and
Mhm.
women. Because when men talk about their problems or any issue they have, it's always in the frame of a problem to be solved.
Mhm.
Whereas, this is a criticism I've heard from so many women.
Mhm.
Women just need to talk.
Mhm.
Does that ring true at all to you? Or
That we need to talk. Here's the thing. It is and it isn't. I almost feel, and this is something really kind of, and I don't know if this is just a personal thing, but I feel that there are times that for the sake of pissing more people off, and for the sake of just annoying someone, I would say I'm just going to withhold any kind of warmth. I'm going to give the cold shoulder, and I'm just going to act like you're not kind of there. And but then it's almost like, I guess it's almost like a defeat when they, okay, tell me what's wrong, and like the I don't know if it's like a meme at this point, but just like, oh, well, honey, what's wrong? No, nothing is wrong. And later on, it's just like, well, you know what? And you're just like, lady, you just said that there wasn't nothing wrong. You're just, so
yeah.
I yeah, yeah, sorry about that tangent.
No, but it's true though, because I mean it says something about just how people think about problems. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, whenever I notice this, especially when it comes to archetypes in general, their problems, especially the male ones. Not to say that there aren't physical problems for women in stories, but when it comes to, I mean, there's a reason that predominantly the protagonists are men in let's say action oriented things, because it's a physical threat. It's how they
Yeah,
deal with their problems.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, uh, so I mean, I guess that's also kind of why I'm not saying that we're not willing to see like female heroes, but I think that the way that a female hero is, I think that who was it? Peterson mentioned that it might be the case that the female hero is like Beauty and the Beast, you know? So, because again, she is that emotional side. Well, women are the emotional side. They are yeah, they're driven by emotion. They're a little bit more, I would almost like, I wouldn't really say up in the air, but they're not, but they're everything that's a little bit more intangible in a way. I almost feel they're a little bit more intangible. So the way that and I mean, and here's the thing, why do you think that 50 Shades of Grey was so popular? I mean, that's another thing. I think that it's another variation of Beauty and the Beast. I
Yes.
mean, and let's not forget about Jane Eyre, or what's another one? I don't know, but like like those really campy romance models that you see in the bookstore with the awful book covers that you're just,
Yeah.
yeah. So basically those are all playing on an idea. Well, I mean, not all of them, but the majority of them are playing on the idea of a dominant man who is a beast, but she ends up civilizing him, you know? And so,
I
you
love
know,
I love the metaphors for marriage in a lot of way there.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, both men and women, or your partner, or you and your partner, you civilize each other, right?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, as much as there was this whole outrage with 50 Shades of Grey that came up, and it was just like, oh, I mean, or Twilight's another one, where they're just where a lot of them were just saying, oh, why do we favor like we have to stop like appreciating this kind of like toxic masculinity and all like that. It's like, but here's the thing. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm of the belief that if a woman tells you that she does not like a tough guy, or who is not like who's not necessarily, if they're not attracted to the idea of a dominant guy, of a guy who's a bit of a beast, then she's bloody well lying, because like secretly a part of you, or a part of a woman wants to wants that roughness to the tenderness that she has, right? I mean, it's the yin and the yang thing all over again.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, and I think that was just one thing that okay, I used to be on Tumblr, so there is a bit, so I would occasionally come across like the, oh my gosh, 50 Shades of Grey. It's so patriarchal. It's toxic masculinity. Let's talk about others that are. Jane Eyre is. What else is? There's Twilight. We shouldn't be admiring these images because or these archetypes because they're inherently harmful and all. It's like, yeah, but then you're taking away. I almost feel it's like you're taking away the challenge from the woman.
Well, I don't understand. I've never understood what they mean by toxic masculinity.
I I never understood it. I mean, I would almost say, okay, if there's toxic masculinity, there's surely toxic femininity. No, 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 no. How can you say that? We're benevolent. We're compassionate. And it's only for for men that they apply it to. But I never understood it. I just think that there's a shadow to every light.
Well, I have always thought that just in terms of this concept of toxic masculinity, I could say that there's credence if they gave it a different name, destructive masculinity.
Yeah, I could go with that. Yeah.
There's something, because toxic involves something that is slowly creeping, that it just spreads the whole concept, kind of like an infection. Whereas destructive, it kind of there is a person you could point to as saying, yeah, that is destructive. But likewise, there's also destructive femininity. Fucking Helen of Troy.
Helen of Troy. Let's not forget. I mean, well, here's another one. Lilith is another one. You could attribute Eve to that as well, in a way. Or there's the Oedipal mother.
Yeah.
There's the Nordic goddess Hel of the underworld. There's Eris, the goddess of chaos. I mean, there's Tiamat too.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, on the male side, there's parts of the Iliad, the Iliad where it's not Odysseus, it's shit. I always forget his name. His mom dipped him in the river Styx.
Oh, right, yes.
Achilles has that, his range, and then in more modern interpretations, Darth Vader's entire story is that.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, and then you can just have this. You just have a slew of examples of destructive, but I've always hated that term toxic. It just never sits well with me. Well, but I think because it's constantly come up in this discussion. What is your problem with? I suppose, what do you think is an archetypical feminist at this point, or where do you think they fall in terms of archetypes?
I will continue attributing them to the archetypal Lilith, honestly. Because here's the thing. I read something really interesting the other day, and this is particularly about like the concept of like why is it that was Eve that was selected and all. Because here's the thing. I feel that feminists kind of fall under the they fall under this kind of this Lilith archetype because there's, I mean, if are you familiar with the story of Lilith at all, or?
Vaguely, but I would say for the viewers, it would be good if you just give a slight breakdown.
Okay, so so Lilith was Adam's first wife before Eve. Now the difference between Lilith and Eve was that Lilith was made by God the exact same way that Adam was, so she was made from dust. And if I have this, if I'm not mistaken, because I almost feel that feminists kind of have gotten their hands on this and have been trying to contort the story a bit. But I'm going to give what I assume is the reading, but if not, it might actually be might be an ideological perversion on the side of feminists. But the idea was that Adam then says to Lilith, "Lay under me," and she said, "No, we stand as equals," and then she was cast out of the garden, kind of thing, or then she was made into a demon afterwards. Which I'm really suspicious about that reading. I almost feel that's not the right one, now that I think about it, because or it could be, who knows? But I almost feel that is. Here's the thing. So, as someone who goes to an art school in Canada, so you know it's libtard centered, to put it lightly. Like I remember, like the amount of people that I would talk to about, or feminists I would talk to about, like you know, these archetypes, you know, Adam and Eve, Mary, and all like these things. They find the concept of Lilith so empowering. Like she seems almost like a, you know, oh, I'm going to stick it to the patriarchy kind of thing. That's why they're so keen on her, you know? So, but I almost feel they're either Lilith or they're Eve. And the reason why I'm pulling in Eve is because, they're being tempted by something to be, they're being tempted to be above, you know, they're being tempted to be above man, to be above, to be above, to be above men, just to be above, to be wise. And I think that's kind of where that's how Lucifer became a fallen angel, because he fell in love with his own intellect. And I think that's what they kind of risk at this point. I'm not really, that might be a little bit of a botched way to put it, but there's a really interesting book, and this is kind of where I'm taking this idea. I forgot the name of the author. It's called The Hidden Power of Women. And she basically, the author, I don't know her name right now, but she basically goes into detail, kind of like saying how feminists seem to be Eve being tempted by a serpent in a way, or being tempted by a promise. And she basically said that, you know, feminists before, like the suffragettes and all like that, they came from a good place. They started off from a good place. These were biblical women. These were Christian women that pushed forward that pushed forth the movement, that had the concept of truth to heart. You know, so the thing is, what this author was suggesting, and I have to find that author now. It's going to drive me mad. Mm-hmm. I don't, but she basically said that if feminists want to save themselves, they have to go back to what made them go forward in the first place, or to start off in the first place, and they came from a place of truth.
Yeah.
And truth, if we want to put it in a biblical archetypal sense, we know that is embedded in the idea of God the Father and God the Son, right? So we have to become humble again. We have to kind of get off our kind of, I would almost say, Luciferian pride, and come back to something that was core. And that's why I'm pleased to see that there are some women that are saying, you know, I want to be a traditional woman again. But I think it's not so much becoming a traditional woman, but just to sit down and kind of going, well, where did all this, like how did we get here? What is the core? I don't think that, I mean, you're not really treating the symptom, you know, you're not treating the ailment, you know.
Well,
And I
yeah,
think,
because I think you mentioned this in the group before, but what is your feelings? Because you if you attribute this to Lilith, what do you attribute the male feminist to?
oh, the male feminist, that's a good one.
Yeah, I know it's a conundrum, isn't it?
You know what? I remember there was this discussion that Gadsad had with Jordan Peterson, and Gadsad basically said that male feminists are like what the evolutionary
The sneaky fucker.
a sneaky fucker thing. I'm sorry, I love that concept because I almost I almost believe it because it's kind of like there's just some guys that I mean they know they can't compete, right? So that they feel they have to infiltrate a woman's circle by being more feminine or by uh,
Yeah,
you know it,
yeah.
it's the archetypal cuck. Let's put it like
Well,
that.
I think what I've noticed about these people is, well, I've talked to some male feminists, and what I find out is that they're very empathetic people. They're
Mhm.
very empathetic. They're very good at reading emotions, and
Uh,
that's what I've noticed about them. So they can't compete with for finding women. They can't. And I
mhm.
know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I think I don't know. Maybe you can speak to this on as a woman, but they're not very good in the masculine part of
No,
no, they're not. They're not very
no.
good at having those more manly virtues. They're very good at, in fact, in some ways, I think they detest them,
Mhm.
and I've never understood why. And
That that they did the test what? Sorry.
the more masculine virtues, the
Oh, yeah, yeah, they do.
I've never understood why though. I mean, I mean, people sociologists would say it's because they probably grew up in a household full of women, and so
Hmm.
they've never really done anything, which makes sense in certain communities. I would buy that.
Hmm.
I would
Yeah, and
definitely buy that.
yeah. I mean, now if we want to attribute what kind of archetype these male feminists fall under, geez, that's a hard one. I wouldn't. Well, they're not they're not really tricksters. They're I don't even. I almost feel that there's something there's a kind of self pity that goes behind it for some reason, and like like a lot of the male feminists that I see, like I mean, and I think this is the same for people that are white that have white guilt, right? Like it's
Mhm.
like they're so I mean they it's like they really hate the fact that they're men almost, but at the same time it's like, well, now I have to live with it, right? But it's I don't know. I think that'll be something I'll have to think about. But I mean, I always kind of thought of I always thought of incels kind of being more lenient to being male feminists. I could be wrong about that.
Involuntary. Well, could you explain what that term means, just for people
Oh
watching?
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So well, for those of you who are familiar with MGTOW, men going their own way, supposedly the incels are not necessarily a part of that school, but they also kind of have like they can't get with women because they believe that there's that that they're not that they believe that they're pretty much genetic garbage and they can't really get in they can't really they can't get a woman because or they can't have sex because there's something genetically wrong with them or but here's the thing they want to in the end MGTOWs on the other hand are just willfully saying I don't want anything to do with women because we're in a gynocentric kind of society now and we want our absence to be kind of felt kind of thing. That's how I'm interpreting it. Which I'm just gonna squeeze this in real quick. I almost feel they're playing the same game that the feminists are. Just saying.
They are playing the same game. I still have pity for,
Mhm.
I have sympathy, I should say, not pity, because that sounds condescending, but I do
Mhm.
have sympathy for their plight. The problem is,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
the problem is people are starting to know, women are starting to have a come around. I think you've touched on this more I don't know, what would you call it, traditionalist movement?
Yeah, I guess there is this kind of rise back to traditional femininity, right? So I do almost feel that I feel that MGTOW in particular, incels not so much. Honestly, I think I have a lot more. I think it's a mixture of pity and sympathy that I have for incels, which, oh, by the term incel means involuntary celibacy. So you can just make
They're basically they're basically the non-desirables as far as
non-desirables, yeah. But the thing is, I almost feel that. I mean, I watched this documentary. It was a 30-minute long documentary on incels, and it was called Shy Boys. And it basically, what I noticed is that a lot of these incels kind of took on kind of feminist mantras, almost, you know. And I almost feel that that's kind of like this kind of like, not because there's malicious intent behind it, but I think it's kind of like a sneaky fucker kind of idea, you know? Like it's like, well, I can't compete in the male competence hierarchy. So I mean, the only way that I know that I can, like any chance that I have of getting a woman is if I actually if I actually get into their circle, or if I actually agree with their ideas, and maybe I might actually get something out of it. But yeah, the thing is with MGTOW, I feel that there's a lot more resentment, you know. And what I'm usually worried about is that they end up doing the same thing that the feminists do, you know. And I'm not. Now, here's the thing. I know that there's a lot of issues that happen with, with guys that we're not looking at. We've had a we've had a blind spot towards men's issues for a really long time. I'm there's like no question about it. But here's the thing. I just think that they shouldn't be playing the same dirty postmodern oppressor versus oppressed game that the feminists are.
yeah.
I think that you can do a lot better than that. I think that it's. I mean, it's funny. I had an argument with someone who was a MGTOW, and he was kind of trying to make the case that MGTOW isn't stooping to their level. That they're just saying, we want nothing to do with women. We're going our own way. And I'm just going like, yeah, but isn't that what women were doing, or feminists do as well? It's like, oh, I don't need a man. I'm going to go my own way. I mean, you're also shirking off responsibility here. And honestly, I mean, to be quite frank, I think it's another contributing factor why the West is in such a weird state right now. Is because of these people. It's because of like these two sides. And if we want to talk about gender or the sexes, men and women, kind of. I mean, if they're giving each other the cold shoulder, then it's like, well, nothing's to be gained from this. So that's basically where I stand. But that was a bit of a rant. I apologize for that.
Well, here's the thing. Well, it's okay. I mean, this is kind of a helter-skelter kind of thing in the first place. But but when it comes to like, I sympathize with both sides. Well, not really both sides, because I don't know what other concessions people can make to feminists.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as this revival thing, because I've always said that one of the goals that anybody should strive for is to find a family, to find some sort of companionship. We are not fucking islands.
Mm-hmm.
I there seems to be this weird misconception that men are totally capable of being isolated and nothing happening to them.
No, we're social creatures in the end. You can't just sever the ties, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a highly antisocial person, but
Oh no.
I still go with my family every Sunday to dinner.
Mm-hmm.
That's still kind of a thing for me. So it's my weekly interaction with humanity. But no, but when it comes to the whole male-female relations right now, I think I think I agree with you in a lot of ways that it's in such a bad strait right now. I mean, there's a reason. I don't know why, and this might explain why a lot of Western men are dating Eastern women.
True. Yeah. Yeah. You know what I find interesting? I remember there was a documentary the other day. Well, not a documentary, but I think no, this is like from a couple of years back. I think I don't know how much. I think maybe even like maybe even 7 years ago. I remember the first time when I heard about like the what was it? The life-size dolls
Yeah.
kind of, you know? So, but I heard about that in Japan though, that there are men that were basically getting these life-size dolls, dressing them up, taking them out to eat and all like that. And basically the reasoning for that was, well, because women are now becoming more competitive, they're not women anymore. We just want a traditional woman, and they're nowhere to be found. What I found hilarious is that fast forward to like 5 years later, I see the same things also in Japan. I don't know if you're familiar with the whole host club idea, or
Vaguely.
okay, so they're basically okay. For those of you who don't know, unless you are a weeb, let me just run it down. Basically, these are like cafes that have a certain theme that they have really attractive looking people there, either men or women, and some of them are just exclusively men, some of them are just exclusively women, where you basically go and you pick one of the people there, and they'll flirt with you, or they'll basically like keep you company, and they'll just make you feel good. It's not necessarily like a prostitution thing, but just company. There was a woman. This is this coverage that I saw like I think it was 5 years ago, which was this woman kind of was going to these male cafes, and she would pay for one of these guys to sit with her and flirt with her and tell her, oh, you're so cute and all like that. And she said, well, the reason why I do it, I'd rather just do this, pay someone to be compassionate with me and all like that, because I can't trust men anymore. So I found that hilarious, that you're just like, okay, guys are complaining about women were not traditional enough and they're no longer women, and I just want to go back to the good old days. And then here you have then a woman kind of going about and saying, I can't trust men anymore, so I have to pay a guy to say that he likes me. You're just like, you guys are not fixing the problem,
Well, Japan is like a microcosm. It's sort of like the warning to the West in a lot of
In a
ways.
way, in a lot of ways, but I almost feel that there's also something that we can learn from Japan in certain ways. Now, okay, we know they're the most xenophobic country, but they have their reasons to be
Oh yeah.
so people. So in that regard, and I almost think they're almost a little bit more modest in terms. I was watching this video by Black Pigeon, I think the YouTuber's called, and he was talking about the differences between how the West does gay pride and how Japan does gay pride. They're so much more tame, you know.
Yeah, well, it's not. I've noticed this just on a little tangent. Yeah, they are a bit more. I get say, yeah, reserved would be the best way to describe it.
Okay, I'm really sorry for the sound in the background.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
No, it was. I'm just saying that their pride celebrations are a bit more tame. They're a bit
Mhm.
more, I guess, sort of nonchalant would be the best way to describe it.
Yeah, and I mean, in many ways, they are. I mean, here's the thing: more and more, I kind of start to understand where Japan is kind of coming from, in terms of one, putting their country first and all like that. But I mean, in regards to, I mean, there are certain things that I'd agree with, like that we should like kind of look to in a way. But I mean, but obviously the West and the East, we're different cultures altogether. I mean, the globalists have it wrong that that we can just become homogenous. We're carrying a lot of baggage with us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, and there's like 1,000 years or more worth of all of that history, or all of that the development of a culture. You're not just going to throw that away, right? If it works, then it works, and I mean, obviously there's some that become stagnant and become become rotten at some point, and then they have to kind of be reformed. But I mean, I mean, otherwise,
Yeah.
yeah, just let the damn thing roll, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know when it comes to stagnation of culture, and particularly of the West. I think we could talk about this for a little bit. What do you think do you think it's mostly the responsibility aspect that's kind of changed? in terms of why we in the West are stagnant? We're not taking responsibility for certain things.
I would say that's a part of the issue, but I almost feel that's not deep enough as to, why we're having this kind of collapse. I'm working on a video right now, and it's about the decline of masculinity, but I kind of go into a little bit more about how if we see a decline in masculinity, and I would argue even femininity, that's even an indication of a civilization collapsing. I think also Camille Paglia pointed out that this whole transmania and blending of the sexes is an indicator of a civilization losing confidence in itself and ready to collapse. So, and basically, I feel that it's as if we're not willing to affirm certain things about our civilization. Like, we're not willing to affirm the fact that Western civilization is based on, for instance, Christian tenets, or we're not willing to affirm male or female, or we're not willing to affirm one truth for another truth. We're in this stage where we're just not willing to we're not willing to favor one over the other. It's like the ultimate act of, what would you call it? Of indifference. I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing why there's this talk of Western civilization kind of teetering on a bit of a collapse, and a lot of things, and obviously, a lot of things contribute to that. Well, there's a lot of things that we notice in it, like, for instance, decline of masculinity, decline of femininity, the non-affirmation of the sexes, the non-affirmation of our heritage. I mean, like those are just kind of like, I guess those are just kind of like symptoms, but
I think another issue or another problem that I think the West is facing is the encroachment of certain ideas, certain ideologies, that is. And no one's willing to call them out for what they are, which is destructive.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I could name a few, but I think I've talked about them a couple times. But obviously postmodernism would be up there, or at least a certain interpretation. Because I'm gonna give leeway and say that not all aspects of postmodernism are.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Terrible.
I think there are some positives that have come out of postmodernism, like, well, obviously the idea that there's a huge array of interpretations, but to assume that none of them are true is false, because I mean, yeah, you pick what is useful, what is actually going to bring you closer to something, that's going to bring you closer to your goal. So that means you have to affirm one truth for another interpretation, or you'll have to approve of one interpretation over another one, and we're almost afraid to do that. Like, we're afraid to call a spade a spade. I think that's also another thing with this political correctness thing is it's a fear of affirmation. In a way, it's a fear of coming up and speaking the truth and saying, no, well, this is this and that is that.
Well, yeah, it's sort of the fear of saying the West is the best. It's sort of this fear of Western chauvinism in a lot of ways.
It is, and the thing is, and I mean, if you look at like movements at the like the alt-right, they're the tyrannical father coming back, and I almost feel that they are. I mean, I am sympathetic to the cause of the alt-right. Don't get me wrong. I just feel that they have to kind of be careful in.
Them racializing it makes me concerned.
Yeah, exactly. I think that like the whole ethno-nationalism kind of thing has me also a little bit concerned too. The minute they touch on race, and the minute I understand that there are fundamental differences between the sexes and gender and all like that. But here's the thing: like some of them do believe in like hardcore traditional. Like, we need to go back. We need to go back. Like, they have to do a harsh comeback, and I'm just like, I don't know if we can do a harsh comeback. I'm a little bit pessimistic about it because, I mean, especially in regards to women, if you tell like women now, you know what, it's okay if you just want to, get married, have kids, raise a family, then you can. I almost feel it's like the scales have fallen from our eyes as women that we know what's out there. You're kind of like, and then just say, okay, no, let's go back now. You're just like, look, some women are capable of doing great things, but you know what? I feel that's like a really low percentage of women.
Well, I've said this. Well, it's also a low percentage of men. I'm sorry, but that's fucking true. Now, they might be greater than the women, but it's still a low percentage of people. They are special. They are special. It's okay to say that.
It's okay, and I mean, if you're bloody good at something, then and you think it's worth sacrificing the usual lifestyle for something that you're really good at, by all means do it. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm just saying that, like, in regards to like the alt-right or the people that are just like, we need to go back, like we have to do a harsh comeback of traditional values and all like that. It's like, okay, yes and no. The left and the right, conservatives and liberals, need to have an open dialogue about this kind of stuff. I mean, we got to know where do we put the boundaries, right? We can't just have all the open borders and have everything bleed into one another. Because I mean,
what I've noticed is that, just talking about this, that's another thing that I've really disliked, is this concept of the nation state is evil, inherently evil, and I was like, no, that's been the mode of government now for roughly 120,000 years.
Exactly.
So, exactly. I mean, so just fundamental things have been eroding. Then you have, following the postmodernists, a bunch of communists and Islamists in their wake.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and also, I mean, just to kind of veer back to like this concept of like of fantasy and this kind of like repression of like or like not even like a repression, but like I feel that I mean, like they're trying to break down some really fundamental axioms of our civilization, which I think also has a bit of a archetypal like fantasy tone to it. Because if you think about it, I'm thinking a lot about like these reboots too. Did you ever watch Maleficent?
Yes, I did watch it.
That was a huge perversion of the archetypes. I think I was more annoyed with that than I was with Frozen.
It was. It's kind of. I mean, it was a good movie. I will say this: it was a damn good movie. But I will say that it was a fucking. If you really wanted to get something out of it, as far as archetypes, you're kind of screwed in that regard.
Yeah, because it's a lopsided story. Like, to me, Maleficent is an archetypal representation of feminism.
Yeah.
That's like, to me, it is this like concept of like, oh, I know that there's all of these terrible aspects about the Wicked Queen, but you know what? She's actually all good, and she had every reason to be pushed to the to the edge. It's like this other like kind of like sympathy for the devil kind of thing.
Well, I've often said a good sympathy. Just a little tangent. A good sympathy for the devil story is acknowledging that, yeah, this guy was kind of screwed over, but at the same time, they don't give him the excuse. They never give him the excuse, saying, "Look, none of this is justified, though."
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's one thing that you and I can both agree on, that stories today are kind of justifying bad action.
Yeah, and the thing is, I almost feel that Maleficent justified like all the bad stuff that she did, and almost all of the male characters in there were like
they were just dickheads.
They were dickheads, exactly. It's like they attributed everything evil to the patriarchy. Pretty much, it's matriarchy versus patriarchy. That's what Maleficent was, and that's why I'm worried about when they start to kind of play around with these older stories. They say, well, let's reinvent it for the modern age. And it's like, the thing is, with some of these stories, I mean, they go back thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and then just to think that, oh, we could just fix this up so that it's more PC friendly. I mean, you think fantasy is also like another. It's a how to act in the world, you know. And when you pervert that, I mean,
Well, I mean, fantasy was meant to give us some direction.
yeah.
You know, it was. I mean, if you look at the probably the most common, you know, the root of modern fantasy, Lord of the Rings, that entire series was filled with great archetypes. You know,
Oh, it was jam packed. I would almost oh, oh, hello. Oh,
a computer, if that
oh,
makes any sense, because it keeps driving me out. But yeah, like what were we saying though? What we talk? I think we were talking about Lord of the Rings for a second before my computer shit
yeah,
out.
yeah.
No, no, I fucking hate my internet so fucking much. But no,
That's
I was saying that Lord of the Rings does provide us really key or really interesting archetypes. You know, you have the classics with Gandalf and you know being sort of this great leader and great wisdom, but it also shows us what the ordinary person can do in extraordinary circumstances.
absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's I mean, and we have to also like understand like, well, here's the thing: the people that do kind of play around with the archetypes and that are quote unquote trying to make it PC friendly, like I think they're very much aware of what stories can do, but it's kind of propaganda what then they turn it into. Like that's how I look at like movies like Maleficent and Frozen too.
What was your problem with Frozen? Because I had a lot, but I'd like to get a
Okay, so
female's perspective on it.
okay, well, here's the thing. As much as I can appreciate the whole like, you know, you are like as a woman, you're capable of anything. You don't need a man. At a certain point, it gets really annoying, and I
Mhm.
found that really annoying that they either made they made the one guy pushed off to the side and just seems kind of like the just kind of supportive, and it just kind of like, hey, I'm over here. And then you have like this. I think it suffers almost the same thing that Maleficent has. You have like the tyrannical king, and then you have a ditzy prince. I think you see that Frozen. You see that with what's his name, Kristoff, and then you see it with the other with the prince, who's actually ends up being, you know, the bad guy. Another thing that I had a problem with Frozen was that there's this idea of like the whole like let it go concept. Like I now I'm not saying that it's wrong, not wrong to be yourself and all. I just think that it's promoting this idea of unleash all of your chaos onto everyone, and then they have to accept you for it. You don't need to put on restraints. The world is the problem, not you.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a dangerous idea to play with. That is a really dangerous idea.
It's deeply narcissistic.
It's incredibly narcissistic, and again, I think that's I mean, that's something that the whole idea of responsibility. If we want to talk about like how in the media, how in our fantasies, or how in our archetypal stories now do we see this idea of no responsibility, just release it all and just be this little like smorgasbord of chaos. I would say Frozen is definitely one of those that pushes that idea.
Well, I mean, I would say that a more healthy version would be a very recently one that we kind of touched on earlier in the stream, but was Wonder Woman. That was really fucking good as
it was amazing. No, and here's the thing. I mean, if you want to talk about it, I mean, it was not preachy at all. She in the end had to and what I liked is that not all the guys were bad, but what I liked was that it's like, hey, well, maybe there's a part of that in everyone, you know? And I almost feel that she's that Wonder Woman kind of has this like release it all, but focus it. You know, you know this one scene where I think where Steve, you know, okay, spoilers, where I think Steve sacrifices himself, and then she just goes ballistic in the end.
Yeah.
He just starts beating the crap out of everyone, and Ares is just like, yes, just let it all go. And I mean, and then in the end, she starts to be a little bit more refined about her power. So she has so much potential, but she's focused. She's aiming at a highest ideal, which in her view is love. See, that's a positive way to look at it. Because I mean, if you're just chaos, you're just chaos. You just cause damage, and that's what Elsa is ultimately doing. You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I especially liked Wonder Woman in that, like you were saying, it didn't paint men as inherently evil.
Exactly.
And it didn't paint women as inherently good. Like, you have to really question the efficacy of the Amazons in a lot of ways, because they were basically created to save humanity, and they kind of just gave up on it.
They were shirking off their responsibility, and you see that with what's her name, with Hippolyta, the mother of Diana, right? So I mean, and it's funny because, you know, I think there was something that I read that the feminists just didn't feel that Wonder Woman was like feminist enough or intersectional enough. Whatever, that's something else. But
oh, dude, I was reading those reviews and was like, "Are we watching the same damn movie?
Are we watching the same?" You know what I just wanted to kill over and die when I read. It's like, where are all the people of color? Where are the women of color? Like,
oh, but don't
look in the beginning.
well, people in relation to Wonder Woman, you know, there's that whole discussion of what are Israelis, what are Jews.
God.
Oh God, I've gotten into it with with people on both sides. I have people that are hardcore black nationalists and hardcore white nationalists on that issue, and it's a weird It's kind of a weird thing that they both agree on, that they're not either one of them. Like, it's one of those weird things, but intersectionality when it comes to just the stuff in there is, I'm triggered now. I'm actually like, because it upsets me that much. because
I
it's such a stupid concept.
it is a really stupid concept, and again, I almost feel as much as you want to be like here's the thing, and again, this is another thing of like this affirmation thing, this affirmation of truths kind of thing. This whole intersectionality, this whole inclusiveness, it's a fear of excluding, right? So, and that's, I mean, there's nothing, I mean, in the end, you have to exclude some things for another thing. And I mean, to then attribute that to some kind of bigoted bias, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. But just to, hop back to the, what I was kind of getting on this tangent for in the first place, what I found interesting, like particularly about like the concept of the Amazons. I mean, like they wanted to say like, oh, that they're a matriarchal society, like that. I was like, yeah, but this matriarchal society was only possible because of the sacrifice of Zeus, or because Zeus, the patriarch, created this island, created this. And I think that's what I really admired about Wonder Woman, is that it still was conscious of that. It was still conscious of that archetype. Because I mean, in the end, it still attributes the habitable order to the benevolent Father, to God the Father, and it's not at all. I mean, it's not at all resentful about it. I mean, surely like the Amazons are like resentful about like the world of men and all like that. But what I like is that, I mean, in the end, like I really do see Wonder Woman as that. I think of her, and this is not so much in an archetypal sense, but she is kind of like that 1% of women that can play the man's game, or play the game. Let's put it like that. Play the game, because here's the thing with feminists: they want the games to be changed. It's like, no, well, you have to play the game as it
What I
is,
also
right?
admire about her is that she never loses that feminine grace. She's still very much a woman. She doesn't. It's that whole. It's that. I'm going to invoke Anita Sarkeesian here now. She's not the Miss Male. She doesn't automatically become a man. She still has the womanly virtues, but it's those womanly virtues that causes her to go out. So, I mean, we could talk about what she. There's an entire video to be made about why she works the way she does.
Exactly, and that's something that I think is also why I think Wonder Woman right now is a great role model, because she's still feminine, like she's not. This is not at all blurring of the sexes. This is just like, I'm, like she still upholds elegance, she still upholds grace, and she upholds beauty. I think that's something else. I'm one of those people that really is more appreciative of, well, of the notion of beauty, like I mean, particularly like, going to an art school myself, there's like this huge hatred for something beautiful.
Yeah.
Like we have to make something ugly to make a statement. We have to do the shock value, and in the end, I mean, it's like, well, no wonder people avoid modern art museums, and they keep on going back to artists like Raphael,
Yeah.
Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Rubens. I mean, there's no wonder, because here's the thing: beauty transcends suffering in a way. I mean, a beautiful piece of music that addresses, the experience of tragedy. I mean, it really is something that makes it kind of like worth living for, worth striving for. I mean, if you think about also the idea of constructing cathedrals that are so beautiful, it's like, well, we have to. The concept is we have to house the most perfect being in the most perfect vessel, and then it really does inspire people to want to transcend, and that's what I see and what I fear when I kind of look at a lot of postmodern art. When I look at a lot of, oh gosh, when I look at a lot of feminist art up there, I tell you, I've seen some really, really messed up stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
whenever, because I had to take an art class this semester,
Mm-hmm.
and we at the end of it was mostly just, it was mostly essay stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
but at the end we had to do a project, or we could write a paper. But most people elect to do a project. I did too. I did watercolor. I have it, but I'll show it some other time. But I literally did so much research into it, and I base it in part on on the hero's journey, or basically a huge part about it, which no one really talks about. It's called When the Hero Meets God, essentially.
Yeah.
But so I did a lot of research into it, and I spent, because we had to present it to the rest of the class, and I spent like 10 minutes, or no, 15 minutes, just going over the various pieces of it. And it was I will pat myself on the back up for this, is that I did so much research for it. Whereas when it came to everyone else, it was a bunch of postmodernists. Like the one that really sticks out to me is the intersectional feminist in my class, and basically what she brought up was splatter art, and she goes into this long-winded diatribe of how sexist, how every dot represents, like, fuck, I don't remember, because it was just so
word jargony,
because it was just fucking paint splashed everywhere. That's all it was.
I mean, you know what? I remember there was like a performance piece, or I think it was an installation piece in my school, where they basically put like these little like pouches in the girls' bathrooms, and they basically said, "Put your used pads here." Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so you kind of have to sit and wonder. You're just like, honestly, I don't know. It's not inspiring at all. If you think, or there was this one BuzzFeed video about painting with your period blood. Like, why would you aspire to do that? I mean, why would you aspire to put your dung in cans? I mean, the thing is, I almost feel it's like a revenge against beauty. It's like I can't stand these beautiful things because I'm not as beautiful, so therefore I have to tear it down and I have to be really ugly just to get my point across. It's really destructive, and I mean, again, I feel I might be a little harsh sometimes about postmodern art, because I think there are some genuine people that have a really interesting concept of conceptual art, but I just kind of sit here and think, well, if the artist is meant to show us how to see, I don't like some of what they're. I don't know, like some of it. This is a theory I'm trying to develop right now about postmodern art, especially conceptual art, because it's a lot more. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. There's a lot of. I almost feel that artists now have kind of committed the whole like Nietzschean kind of dilemma in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, in falling in love with your own intellect. I feel that they've kind of fallen into that, and the thing is, they no longer operate in the dream sphere anymore. Because I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to study art in the first place was because I admired the sphere in which an artist operated, and he or she operated in a dream sphere. So it's like their thoughts got there before words could get there. Their works got to the concepts before the words could even get there. That was something that I found really interesting. But here's the thing: it's also an idea from Jung that I love, which is how did he put it? In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, he said, Faust. Goethe didn't create Faust. Faust created Goethe, which is basically the same thing as saying, people don't have ideas. Ideas have people. And I think that rings true for artists. And I think that we're getting to the point, or a lot of artists are getting to the point where they attribute so much of their genius to something that's theirs, that's inherently theirs, which, fair enough, but I feel that a real artist doesn't really take any property of that. That's, I may be getting a little new agey about it, but there's a source that they're pulling from, which is like the collective unconscious, and you're bringing it to light. I mean, it's not, it really isn't something that you could say is yours. It's really everyone's. It's impersonal, and I feel that that's something that a lot of artists nowadays who are coming into these art schools with no classical training, no training in art whatsoever sometimes, are being, that's what they're being taught. That's like, like you are the mastermind, you know? And it's just like, at some point we have to become humble about where these, I mean, some of these ideas, if we want to talk about dreams, I mean, what the hell are those? Are those really your ideas to begin with? I mean, that's, so I guess that's something that I consider a bit of a fallacy on the part of art nowadays. Not all.
Just a level of ego involved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. So, what was it?
Yeah, go ahead. What are you saying?
No, because there was something that what you brought up, and I think this is a little bit that I think this is when you asked me to come on. I think you brought up, like, what is it that fantasy is lacking nowadays or something.
Yep. Why don't we see good fantasy in it? And just as literature and in comics or in art, why don't we see that anymore? Why don't we see anything really good? Well, I'd preface this. God damn it! I would stress this. There are good examples, but I would say that they are few and far between. Like, you'd really have to go out of your way to find them.
That is true, and that was one of the things that I was kind of like, when I thought about that question a bit, and I just thought, well, you do have to look for it. I mean, it's not necessarily that there's no good fantasy anymore. I guess, like, you really do have to look for it. I mean, I almost think that I almost feel that video games are preserving fantasy a little bit more than some movies are. I mean, obviously, we did bring up like movies like Wonder Woman, which does a really good job in preserving archetypes and fantasy.
Yeah, my God, it's weird. It's one of those things that I can't do today. But it's one of those things that I've often said, that good movies are becoming few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas good video games are less so. That you could find at least 2 or 3 out of a group of 6.
That is true. But somehow I feel, now this could just be me, but I feel that the ones that tend to do a little bit better are the ones that still are kind of faithful to some kind of like fantasy. If you look at, like, I don't know, Skyrim, or I'm personally someone who loves the God of War series. So.
I fucking love God of War. I'm so amped for the next one.
I know, it looks so good.
By the way, speaking of character development, Kratos is going to show some emotion? Oh my God.
I found that really, I was like, what? Really? I mean, at first I was really iffy about, because I was a little bit iffy about them going now to a Nordic setting then, because I'm like, wait, but Kratos is a Greek. He's a Spartan, he went against the Greek pantheon. Now you're going against the Nordic pantheon. But anyways,
I just can't wait to battle Thor. I just can't wait for it.
That would be so cool. I mean, there's one thing that I really liked about God of War. I just loved how hyper everything it was. It was like super hyper masculine and super hyper feminine whenever the women came in. I mean, sure, they were over sexualized and all, but for some reason, like, I just liked it when everything was kind of just like amped up in a way, you know?
I mean, because it was fantasy.
It
worked. It worked so well. That's another. I think that's another reason. I think people try to inject too much realism into their fantasy.
And that could be a bit of a downfall. It doesn't mean that the fantasy doesn't live on. It's that, I mean, we bring it down to such a point that it's just like, oh, well, you're not bringing it to an everyday occurrence, and you're not, like, making it at all special anymore. Like, I don't know why. I know I keep bringing up 50 Shades of Grey, but I almost feel that, I mean, they're playing on a fantasy of Beauty and the Beast, right?
Yeah.
But they've brought it down to a colloquial level that I guess for some people it's like, well, for some people it's it's interesting still, but for others it's just kind of like, well, I mean, you're bringing it down to earth, and it's kind of like, I don't know. it's as if they're watering down certain concepts, or they're watering down certain lessons that somehow fantasy handles so much better, and on such a grand scale. Even, I mean, I think that I feel that, I mean, good fantasy is something that just leaves you in awe, right? And that's
Yeah.
something that, and that's particularly why I love like the God of War series. If we want to go back to video games, are you familiar with the Dante's Inferno game?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Okay, okay, I happen to love that game.
I do too.
I know it's kind of, it might seem like a bit of a ripoff of God of War, but I don't care. I love hack and slash. But
Yeah.
but what I love about those two is that they're so faithful or they're faithful, but they bring something new to the myth. You know,
They amp it up.
they amp it up. It's explosive, the fantasy, and like, okay, they're reinterpreting it, well, not reinterpreting, but they're like reimagining it. But it's like, it's neat how the story, how they have the story live on, you know. So I think that, honestly, I don't think that necessarily fantasy is dead or anything like that, or it's dying out. It's definitely there. You just really have to look for it, and and it is in some of like a little bit more of these underground kind of or these more obscure kind of sources where you will find it. Actually, recently my sister's boyfriend did a Dungeons and Dragons scenario for us, and it's funny because he went ahead and he wrote kind of the story for it, and I'm just like, well, see, here's also a proof of it. There's still people out there that are willing to pass on the story, you know, and it doesn't matter what form it will how it's going to manifest itself. It's still there. It's still a part of the collective unconscious. It's never going to die out. The only thing is, if you want to talk about like mainstream fantasy is just going down the toilet, I think it's because of, first of all, using it as ideological propaganda. That's one thing.
Great.
The other thing is, I would almost say, bringing it down to earth so much to the point where it becomes too colloquial almost. Like there's nothing then really, I guess, epic about it in the end. And I would also say that it has to do, I mean, this dumbing down of fantasy, like mainstream wise. I don't know. I almost feel I would say most of it is because of ideology. You know, I do wholeheartedly believe that just this idea of perverting these stories and turning them into something that they're not is also a part of the reason that, well, you know, they'll come off as preachy, or, you know, people would just sit there and say, well, that's not how the story goes. I know how the story goes, and you just decided to butcher it because, well, you know, political correctness, for instance, or I don't know, well, just to fulfill a an agenda, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
Mhm.
that's been a complaint of. I mean, have you ever heard of the Sad Puppies debacle?
I've actually never heard about it.
You really should go look at what happened there. Basically, a bunch of well, you ever heard of the God, I don't know what it's called, but it's a high fantasy award, and basically what happened was, you know, I'll look that up now because it's a good leave off point that I wanted to talk about, just ideological problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you as far as ideology. Like, could you give like an example that you've seen recently?
About like ideology.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I almost feel that certain movies, for some reason, I feel The Force Awakens has something kind of fishy about it. In
Oh
that
no!
sense.
Oh yeah! Oh no! I agree with you
Huh?
100% because
Uh-huh.
I went my film school.
Hmm.
I was probably me and my friend Aaron are probably the only two people in my entire class that absolutely hated The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we loved, Rogue One, hated The Force Awakens, and it's all because of the character Rey.
Yes, I agree. I can't stand Rey.
I mean, it's just because people say, oh, well, she's just like where Luke started. No, very different than Luke in regards that she didn't earn her power.
She didn't, no, and it's like all of a sudden, I mean, now you could argue, and I would actually challenge someone to make the argument point that like this whole, you know how we talked about this idea of Mary or woman being she who brings in salvation. Like you could even say that, oh, but this isn't Rey fulfilling that prophecy? I'm just like, oh, well, that kind of archetype. I'm just like, yeah, no, well, sorry. Like to me, it's, I don't know, like everything about her, just like, oh, I know everything better. I have like these, like I'm, she's kind of like a Mary Sue.
She is a Mary Sue, but nobody wants to call it out. Like now, Luke Skywalker started off as a Mary Sue, but he became his own character in Empire. He developed in the last two, and even in the expanded universe, he continually developed.
Exactly. So, and I also feel, and again, it's a repetition of that whole idea of like a woman is more powerful than a man. You know, what's the name of Finn? Was his name Flynn? Whatever.
Finn, the stormtrooper.
Okay, so I think that also the Force Awakens has this kind of gives us a bit of a sliver of just like, oh, look at like this decline of male heroes in a way. I know that there's Luke Skywalker in the end, and
they killed off one of the main male heroes. They killed off Han Solo.
I know, and I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, really?
In the most unceremoniously crappy way too. I mean, like you could say, oh, it's such a tragic his son kills him. Like, no, he went out like a bitch and everyone knows it. That's stupid.
And honestly, and it really is it's a betrayal of the character too. And I know it was just kind of like, oh, but Kylo Ren is his son. I don't care if I'm spoiling. If you haven't seen it by now, then I'm sorry, but but you know what I mean. I'm just, I don't know, and I feel that particularly like. And here's the thing, like all of like the older, like the old school Star Wars heroes. I mean, they took they weren't present. One of them was killed off, and then you have like these little wimpy guys that come up. And I'm sorry, I do attribute like Flynn to one of those wimpy guys. And oh my gosh, I remember going on Tumblr and just seeing like the whole like, oh, I ship Flynn with what's his face, this other, or Kylo Ren is actually a transgender or whatever. I'm just like, oh my god, guys, please don't do this.
Yeah, well, no, that shit infects everywhere. And speaking of, but like I was talking about the sad puppies, it was called the Hugo Awards. It's a huge fantasy award show. And basically the complaint was that pretty much every right-leaning writer that submitted their stuff, even if it was objectively better, was denied by the panel. The panel came out and said, yeah, we're basically doing this in favor of more progressive writers, and especially writers of color. Was their line.
Yeah.
So the quality fantasy, in my mind, diminishes because
intersectionality too. Yeah, there's that. And again, I'm going to go back to this affirmation thing, that like there's a fear. I mean, we're all okay with excluding something that's white, heterosexual, that's Eurocentric or whatever, in favor of something, other, right? But I feel that like the reason I think that also the whole affirmation thing is a part of the issue is because, well, again, they're not willing to myself in a knot here, because in a way you could say they're affirming that they don't want anything that's white, that's heterosexual, that's Eurocentric, that's Western centric, whatever. But it's kind of like they're not really staying focused on allowing like actually objectively good writing to come through, all for the sake of a fear of exclusion of supposedly other groups, you know. So I guess it's just more of an affirmation of what you just said just now. But yeah, I can totally see that this need to fulfill, well, to gain like brownie points, you know. Hello? Hello?
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh.
But no, I was basically saying that it's not just fantasy that gets maligned by this kind of stuff. It's also basically any work of art that you're starting to. And I don't know. Have you seen? I was wondering if you could give me like an example you might have seen in your school, maybe from class.
Of of something that seems more ideologically driven, or
Just more ideologically driven.
Okay. Well, that's really hard to say, because I feel that a lot of the works are they do teeter on that point. I think I guess I'm going to use myself as an example here, because I think this is interesting, the conversation that came out of this. So I'm somebody like as an artist, I like to. I'm very fond of the female form, especially the idealized female form, and I do find myself very drawn to feminine archetypes. I do find myself attracted to a little bit more like cycling into a little bit more like erotic terrains. So whenever I showed my work, I think there was something that it was a sentiment that came out particularly within the women, was kind of like, don't like, do you feel that they were asking me, like, do you think this is empowering? This isn't empowering. And this do you think that you're oppressing women through your piece? And I was like, it's funny that you should say that, because I thought that the whole like liberation of female sexuality was a part of what you guys wanted. And now you're saying it's inherently bad. Oh no, it's just because she's idealized and all like that. And it's like, oh my gosh, I am sorry that this is making you self-conscious. There's that really bothered me. Then there were other pieces. Oh, here's one. This is in my first year. There was this girl, and she did kind of like this, kind of like scroll watercolor pieces of like these women walking, and they're dressed up as male superheroes. And she was basically saying, it's like, yeah, well, because I feel that women are not represented as well as men in comics, and I can't say that I don't like it that they use superheroes like Wonder Woman or Catwoman, or like these women that give into a sort of male fantasy and all these things. So I mean, you could say that's kind of like, well, this girl was doing two things, I think. Well, one, obviously getting an ideological message across. Secondly, well, it's an alteration of these archetypes, right? So, and she was basically just saying, well, all of these, it's not fair that the noble heroes are male. And a part of me was just thinking that, I'm just like, well, who's to say that Wonder Woman, that there's no nobility to Wonder Woman? Who's to say that there's no nobility to, I don't know, Phoenix or
she's literally a noble.
Yeah, exactly. So you're kind of sitting here. And obviously this is coming from someone who doesn't. I mean, I think she wasn't really well versed in comics in the first place. So she thought she could just go ahead and take a jab at it. And I was like, well, you do your research first, right?
Yeah.
At the very least.
I've always been attracted. Whenever I did my drawings, I was always attracted more to the monsters. And for a lot of reasons, they're just cooler. in my opinion. Very simplistic, but that's kind of the truth. But I also, I also like doing the research into them. That they do represent something. Like a dragon, usually, if it's a benevolent dragon, it's a, it's a sign of it's a show of peace. It's a sign of strength. But I never understood. But I once had a friend try. Oh, not a friend, but an acquaintance in my art classes try to. He tried to ask, well, what does the monster represent? This is before I was really into like researching and stuff. I was like, it's just a monster. That's all it is. It's just a giant monster. I hate when people try to overanalyze something. It's like,
absolutely, yeah. I mean, here's the thing, and it's just, I mean, if you're interested in this kind of concept of like artists and the collective unconscious, there's a Modern Man in Search of His Soul. I don't know which chapter it is, but Jung basically talks about two different artists. One is a psychological artist who knows exactly what he's doing to the T. He tries to make it so comprehensible to the fact, to the point where you don't need an explanation because it's all there. The visionary, however, doesn't know what he does, but he just does it. And that proves to be way more interesting because people will pick up on a lot more things and a lot more hidden ideas than with the psychological artist. So that's actually something kind of interesting too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I've tried to do that a bit more with my own art, just looking at what it might mean, trying to analyze it.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you've ever tried to analyze your own art. It's
absolutely.
Definitely hard.
You know what? Here's the thing. I almost feel that I fall into a bit of a category of being a little too psychological or too cerebral, because here's the thing. I find it really fascinating. Like for instance, I like to intentionally put in an archetype because I'm like, I find this really interesting, and I like how this connects back to this, and this connects back to that, and then and then we've just come full circle. So I do. Like I try to be a little bit absent-minded about it, but at the same time, I'm sometimes really tempted about analyzing myself too. And it's like, it's really interesting that you like, I don't know, for instance, like, it's really interesting that you like to paint women more, or it's really interesting that, that you paint them nude, or it's really interesting that, and then, because here's the thing, I feel that that there's a lot of your subconscious that is going out there, and it's fun to have to pick it out. I remember when I used to, I had like 2 sessions with this psychologist, and she basically asked me to bring in all my small little like watercolor drawings, and she basically asked me about them, and she said, well, this is what I'm getting from, like, this is what this piece tells me about you. And I find that really, really interesting. That's why I love the concept of like art as therapy too,
I'd love to take what I've kind of noticed is that all the monsters that I've drawn since I was a little kid are always protecting something. I wonder what that says.
You know what? If you're really interested about that, I mean, you could always get yourself like one of those like what are they called? They're like these dream dictionaries. I find them really fascinating. Or just like, or just looking into the archetype itself, or just thinking about like what is it that you feel from it too, or what is it that you're being protected from, or what is it that maybe you are protecting? It's there's a reason why I also don't like this idea of prodding at visionary artists, because here's the thing, they're like messengers almost, they're like messengers from the dreamscape. They won't have the words for it, or if you're a writer too, you're not going to have, like, the words are as good as you can get them to be, right? And that's something that I found admirable about art in the first place. That's why I wanted to pursue an artistic career. And I mean, I'm going into my 4th year, and I'm sitting here, I'm just going like, I see all of that dying now. And the only way that I can see it is through art history,
Yeah.
and I'm only finding satisfaction in looking at, in analyzing art that's like, for instance, I love looking at medieval art. Like
Oh
early
yeah.
medieval. I think it's absolutely stunning what was achieved during those times. Um, Also, I mean, another like movement that I find interesting is the Art Nouveau era too. Like this idea of wanting to go back to something idyllic in the modern age or in the industrial era, with the with the Vienna Secession. So I feel that the only way that I can see all of these, all of these meanings, all of like this jam packed, beauty that transcends suffering. I can only see that in art history now. Or, I mean, there was one class that I took that was really interesting. That was a dream and metaphor class, which was basically trying to figure out who you are, not as an artist, but as a person, kind of figure out your myth. And that I found that really interesting too. And and it's funny, the teacher of that class was kind of saying that how I think the school wanted to get rid of her class, because they didn't really find it particularly useful, particularly for second years. And then the same happened with my medieval art and architecture teacher too. It's like, well, there's no use in looking back at history, and it's like, well, like, well, we're looking back at medieval art. It's just like, well, how can you assume that? There's a lot of things that we take from it, and to begin with, I mean,
Most of my city's architecture is based on medieval art, specifically in Scandinavia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, you're just going like, you're intentionally trying to erase this from the consciousness of a lot of people, and so I guess it's a little bit of my rant about being in art school, because it's just kind of going like, well, I came in thinking, like, we are we are those people that sit between order and chaos, or just in the dream in general, and the fact that we've become so much of the world. you know uh, there's a saying from these Viking runes that I used to fiddle around with when I was like 18.
Mm.
It was, be in the world but not of the world. And I think that is something that artists usually were. But I think that we become so much of the world, so much of our intellect, and I think this is particularly why fantasy, like mainstream fantasy, may not even be coming out naturally, or it may not even be it may not be as thrilling as it used to be, is because one, we're trying to control it so much in a way, even though it's like we want to release everything, we want it, we're like, we're all about like this whole like open border thing, we're all about like intersectionality and all like that. There's still a need to control, right? And even and that source, that the whole collective unconscious fantasy is exclusive with in regards to a lot of things. It follows a very, like, it follows a very, not narrow path, but a more focused. It has a very focused path. It could be whether it's variations of the hero's journey, or whether it's in regards to the archetypes. I mean, if you look at some people's dreams that have really vivid dreams, they're archetypal as hell, and that's because you'll never do away with it. And it's as if, as much as we want to be intersectional and be inclusive, in the end, they're trying to box it up paradoxically by excluding, So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think we're gonna leave that there for tonight, because we've been going for almost 3 hours.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so time goes by fast.
Nice.
So I want to thank Tatiana for coming here.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
I would love to have you back if you're more than willing to.
Oh no, absolutely.
All right, so thank you guys. To next weekend, I don't know what the topic will be, but hopefully it'll be something stimulating as it was tonight. All right, thanks guys. Bye.